coming up on the CannaCribs podcast.
Nothing like cannabis. Cannabis is leading the way in technology.
The place where you first look to make the biggest impact is where your biggest consumers are. And we recognized, and the business case was shown, it's like, well, geez, I mean, we could be saving growers $10,000, $15,000 a month.
And so if you're going with an LED, you can get excellent incentive depending on the cost of that LED, maybe 60 to 90% of the LED. Sometimes they offer bonuses where you can even get 100%.
Dude, or anytime they can give you $200 or $300 off a light to save on the cost, bro, it's a no-brainer, man. It's free. Yeah. It's free money.
Hey, I'm Nick, creator of CannaCribs and Growers Network, where we have educated millions of people on how to elevate their craft. I have toured some of the largest grow operations, befriended the best growers, and built a network of the top cannabis companies. Join me on this next adventure where I document history with the pioneers shaping the global cannabis industry in real time. Welcome to the CannaCribs podcast. Hey, thanks for watching. Do you want your own episode of CannaCribs? What about up to $20,000 in facility upgrades? Well, my friend, you're in luck. Sign up today for the CannaCribs and Hawthorne sweepstakes for the chance to win. This sweepstakes ends April 2023, open to U.S. residents excluding Florida and New York, over the age of 21 and currently employed by a licensed facility. You can check out the full sweepstakes rules on the application link below. Best of luck. Welcome back to another episode of the CannaCribs podcast. Today's episode's a little bit unique. We're going to be talking about lighting, all things durable, dehumidification, and energy rebates. Enjoy.
Yeah, 3 years at Hawthorne, which is a really cool opportunity. I actually, take a step back to where I grew up and where I'm from. I'm a small town kid. I grew up in Eastern Ohio in Appalachia on a small farm. So growing is like part of my DNA. It's part of my blood. But growing cannabis is something that's newer to me. I had friends growing up that were obviously involved in that with the area I grew up in. But 3 years ago, when an opportunity presented itself within the Scott's Miracle-Gro organization, I jumped at the chance to come over to this side. I think it's extremely exciting what's happening in this industry, and into it when I got into it, I got to see a rocket ship, and now I get to see the other side of that, which is from a business perspective extremely interesting, and then from a understanding the cannabis market and what everybody's been going through. I think it's a good grounding in the battles that have been happening.
Yeah, and Scott's Miracle-Gro, massive company.
Yeah.
And Hawthorne is a wholly owned subsidiary, but it's probably got that like startup vibe. It's a little bit, different compared to, traditional agriculture. So how have you seen that jump from being over at Scott's for a while, jumping over to Hawthorne? Yeah,
I think, obviously started my career at Scott's. I was on the growing media team for a while and on the fertilizer team for a bit too. Great experience in terms of operating at a large company that is, a traditional CPG. It's, where this industry is heading from a grower's perspective is, a CPG industry. And, I have that background and that experience of, how do you go to market? How do you market products? So that's really applicable to both places, but the speed that Hawthorne moves at, the ability to pivot quickly, think on your feet and find solutions, I think is unique between the two organizations. Hawthorne obviously is, finding our way right now, and we'll make it through this just like most companies will find their way. And that's been a cool experience too, is how do you operate in this world and ensure that everybody's still, has the ability to be successful as we come out of this trough.
Yeah. Survival of the fittest and that resilience gene.
Yeah.
I think that's very unique to everyone in the cannabis game, and, just having your crop destroyed and having to start over, having it be stolen or this or that, with your back against the wall, the only way forward, is just getting up and doing it again.
Yeah. Put your head down, get to work. I mean, that's something that, was instilled in me at a very young age was, you got to work to get what you need in life, to get what you want in life. And, when you're faced with challenges, you can either wilt under that pressure, or you can stand up and run through the wall and get the job done. And,
yeah.
Just the latest challenge, right? We gotta know that it's good. It's going to be good. The end game for this industry is obviously going to be huge. And I would say we're at the 1 yard line of a 100 yard march right now. So always remembering that, and every industry is going to have its ups and downs, and know that the end game is still what we want and still what we want to get.
Yeah. And in my, recent conversations, I'm always hearing and telling others, it's not like people are going to stop smoking weed in 2023, 2024, in the future. This plant is not going away, right? Yep. So people need inputs in order to grow. They need help. Yep. They need all of us, right? Yep. We're experiencing a global downturn. That does not mean that we're going to have, less cannabis next year than the other.
Yep.
So
consumption rate's going up, right? Like,
the
data says more people are consuming than they have in the past, and destigmatization is occurring. We just need to keep that in the back of our minds as we work through this oversupply, and we'll be all right.
Yeah. And how else are we going to get through this world without a little bud? So let's talk about, what excites you the most when it comes to cannabis cultivation.
Yeah. I would say there's two things on it, right? We talked a little bit about it's a really, burgeoning industry. There's just a few industries that exist like this in a lifetime. So that's cool from like a macro business perspective. But from the culture, as I've learned more about it, it's one, the growers are a lot like the people I grew up with, a lot like the people that I've, known my entire lives. They're trying to make ends meet, and they're trying to, grow what they love, and they have that startup mentality, and that's how they want to be successful. And, finding ways to help them, achieve their goals and, operate their businesses is, something that I find gets me up out of bed in the morning and gets me to work. Additionally, the plan itself and the effects that it has, and the fact that our government is, kept that away from people for so long, even though we have a system that literally is, able to, digest and consume, the cannabinoids, is something that, I was a dare kid. I didn't learn that in school. You learn that as you start to peel back the onion and figure out what's really going on there. I have a lot of friends who are in the military. I have friends who had cancer, and, I wish they would have this option to treat what ails them versus, the prescription drugs that are, shoved at people. So, and that's coming from somebody at one point in my life. I did sell prescription drugs. So
there you go. You're joining the other side of the table. Yep. And understanding the big picture. So getting into, some of the lighting design, I've known and been a fan of Gavita for a long time. So maybe we can start out, Lance, with, kind of talking about those major cost inputs that a lot of growers are looking at, and how, when it comes to lighting, that can help inspire innovation in your tech and design.
Yeah. When you think about a P&L and, a grower operating a business, they're either trying to drive increased revenue through, increased yield production or increased quality of that yield. Or they're trying to control costs. And the three major costs that we look at are material costs, the actual cost of the light, utility costs, so, your electric, your gas, your water, and then, your labor cost. So when we identify that, those are really the 5 variables that we're trying to affect, we look at the light and we say, okay, how can we ensure that we have a balance when we bring our product to market? So, I think what we have looked at would say the material cost is actually the least of all the operating costs that come into play for a grower. Labor and utility are actually much higher, and we would beg to bet that those will continue to become more and more expensive as the labor market continues to tighten, and as global warming continues to be a thing with water and electricity.
Yeah. So how do you take these into account when you're actually creating new technology, let's say within the Gavita lighting line?
Yeah. So we're always pushing for a more efficient light. So when you look at where we're at from the 1700, the Gavita 1700 to the Gavita 2400, which is our newest innovation, we're looking to increase the efficiency of that light. the controllability of that light, and simple controllability. And then from a labor perspective, how can we ensure that we're maybe, making the grow cycle shorter, increasing the turnover of the plant, increasing the yield through a higher PPFD, which we believe the plant's able to take more light than what we're actually giving it today. So it's all a balance of all of those things. And at the same time, can we design that product that also is at a value to the grower that they're willing to pay for those increased features? And we believe we're pretty good at that through our approach with talking to, our experts, both inside and outside the company.
And what about material costs? I'm sure that you guys are very intentional about, what you're using to manufacture these industry-leading lights.
Yep.
And also like where you're getting some of these materials. Again, looking at like a macro global perspective down the line, your future supply chains and how they're going to be fueling this innovation.
Yeah. So I think something that I learned early in my career was the Gavita 1700 was I know you guys know this too, was a rocket ship, right? Like it took off, and when it took off, we were behind the eight ball and trying to understand the supply chain and get more control of it to ensure that we could get supply into the market. So what we concentrated on was, looking at the two major bottlenecks that we were experiencing, which were diodes and drivers, and started to work directly with diode and driver companies and, design what we thought is the appropriate diode and driver for the grower. So we have, through our PhDs, created a spec that then we go and source product for. Additionally, we know that getting closer to the United States and closer to where the majority of our demand is coming from, because the U.S. is the global leader in cannabis production right now. It's not really close when we look at volume across the world, especially what's being grown. And we've then decided to set up a manufacturing plant in Temecula, California, where we're now assembling the new light that we're bringing to market.
Nice. I did not know that. So the end light, what type of or what kind of efficiencies are you focusing on when it comes to that design?
Yeah. Two numbers that really matter are the PPF that comes out of light. So basically the amount of photons that it'll put off, and then the efficiency of the use of those photons. So how efficiently can we make electricity turn electricity into photo, plant type of edible source. So, when we're designing a light, and a light like the 2400 or the 1700, where you hang that light depends on how much, actual food the plant can actually have from that light. And what we're trying to do is make as powerful of a light as we can and use light, electricity as efficiently as possible. So an example of that is, an HPS light is generally between 1.9 and 2.0 micromoles per joule, which depends on the type of lamp that you're using with the fixture. LED, the majority of the market today is at 2.5, 2.6 micromoles per joule, which is good. But we believe we'll continue to push that up from a full spectrum perspective into the threes. And then if you're going to run a red blue or some kind of heavier red, we believe we'll get into 3.7s, 3.8s in terms of efficiency, which is, a lot more of efficient use of electricity, which will help growers control their cost input from a utility perspective. Just from the light itself, pretty great. But with LEDs, right, there are alternative impacts on cost as well. So the amount of electricity that your HVAC units deploying, the safety of the light itself. I keep seeing on Instagram, I keep seeing bulbs, lamps explode and catch things on fire. And an LED isn't going to do that. An LED is much safer technology. So you think about all those costs that you can incur, and it is a more expensive light, but at the end of the day, it'll have a better ROI than an HPS light. Well,
you're investing in your future. I mean, I remember, Gavita, HPS, like that just dominated the interweb, right? So tell me how that transition from Gavita being a power player in the HPS side over to the 1930 series and LED? Like, what did that transition look like?
Yeah. So when we look at, you take feedback from growers, right? And what are they most concerned about when they're flipping out lights? And, one of them is if you have a room of HPS, you probably don't want to bring an electrician in and rewire the whole thing. Which is, one of the major barriers. Two is, a light that really performs a lot like the HPS light, at least a transitional type of product. And three, it's, can I grow the same yield and can I grow the same quality of bud that I've been growing my entire growing career underneath HPS? So when we designed the CT series, which is like, our CT 1930, what our PhD took into account are those things. So we have, I think, 12 patents on that product. Those are owned internally. That's an owned internally designed product. So we aren't going to China and using off the shelf products. We are literally designing these in-house with a combination of our PhDs on staff, our technical services team who can do light maps and show us that it's the same or better output, and then our sales team and our grower network that we can then confirm that what we think is true on paper is true in the grow room.
Wow. So the one-to-one replacement, what does that really mean, when it comes to, let's say, Gavita HPS lights? Are you guys going in there with facilities and helping them build out lighting layout, electricity, all that good stuff to make that transition? Yeah.
So the cool thing about the CT 1930 is its polar candela is an exact replica of the HR96 reflector. That's on Gavita. And the HR96 reflector is the most common reflector sold in the market, either through us or through our competition. And that is basically called a 4x6 light throw versus a rack fixture today is a 4x4. So you can get an extra 2 foot of coverage when you have overlap of the two fixtures. And that's what we mean by it is it literally take down an HPS unit from your grow, put a CT 1930 up in its place, plug in some new wires that are up for the computer that is an LED, and you're good to go. And that should be a really quick turnout and a really quick switch from an actual electrical perspective. Obviously, with LEDs, you have to control the environment differently, right? You have to make sure you have that dialed in. But from a strictly light down, light up, with the way that this unit's designed, it's pretty seamless.
So you mentioned polar candela. That's a new term for me. What is that?
It's just the measurement of a light throw. So you put a light into a testing unit, and it'll basically show you where that light is dispersed. Every fixture has a polar candela, so it'll tell you where that light is throwing and how intense it is and how the distance that it'll cover. And like I said, the real secret in the CT 1930 are our patented optics. It is what allows us to have the 4x6 light throw versus a straight down rail system. It also is a very efficient use of light, so you're not losing light in the patented optic system that we have. So that's the secret sauce there.
That's great. So it's a seamless transition from your 1,000-watt DEs over to the 1930 series.
We do know that you have to adjust the environment, right? So we would always, test it in your R&D room, make sure you have your environmental factors dialed in. And if you have any questions, we reach out to us or other growers who already had success with LEDs, and they can help you with that step.
Yeah. You mentioned it's an investment in your future, right? Unit by unit, it might be a little bit more expensive than a traditional HPS, but you're investing in your future efficiency, not using as much electricity, also energy rebates. There's all these great benefits that come from switching over to LEDs.
Yeah, I mean, HPS, right? If you're doing it right, you switch out your reflector and your lamp every grow. And that has added cost from a labor perspective and from a materials perspective.
Yeah.
That's a 3-year life cycle product. LEDs, if you're DLC certified, or 5-year life cycle products. And if you're buying it from a brand like Gavita, you're we're gonna be here in 5 years. We're gonna stand up and be able to answer to that warranty.
Yeah, that makes sense. You guys are in it for the long haul. I know we were chatting about a SWOT analysis for these different lighting fixtures. You're the business guy. What are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for these different lines, or maybe just like the greatest strengths?
I mean, the greatest strength is the better usage of electricity, and that's going to be a cost that growers have to take into account. Is electricity is not a one-time fee; it's a monthly fee that you have to realize is right now probably as cheap as you're going to find it. So if you're thinking about your monthly bills and how do you control your monthly bills, that's one of those things that you have to think about from an operating perspective and not just from a grower perspective. Is how are you going to run a profitable business? Number two is what we found in our research, and we have multiple research facilities. I'm sitting in one right now. We have a high THC facility in Kelowna, BC. We have another facility in Jervis, Oregon, and we study HPS versus CT. And what we found in our studies is that it increases yield and increases the quality of the bud because the plant's under less stress in that environment. What
about some weaknesses for going over to an LED line? I know financial is a big one. I guess if you could see that as a weakness, like upfront, if you only have 90 days cash left, your burn rate, like probably not going to retrofit an entire facility.
Yeah. It's, upfront capital is a giant issue. I would say that the learning curve to make sure your yield is going to stay flat or increase is an issue that you have to make sure you're dialing in. And I think that's why I think if you aren't comfortable with the technology, you trial it, you dial it in, because the future is LED. There's no doubt about it. The future of growing is LED. So start to learn now, figure out the right way for you that works within their own grow is really the solution to come over that weakness. But it's a technology that's here. It's a technology that'll be around for a long time, and the government is actively passing legislation against HPS. Like we're out there on a daily basis experiencing that, either in California or New York.
I did not know that.
We were talking about putting limits on the lower limit on micromoles per joule at 1.9 2.0. If they go to 2.0, it's over for HPS for commercial facilities.
Wow. So that legislation is impacting commercial operators that might have 2, 3, 4,000 HPS fixtures. And
it's going to affect them more like new build outs, right? If you already have it, you're going to be grandfathered in. But if you're building out, you're going to be affected by that energy efficiency. Okay,
that makes sense. So just future builds, they just want them to be more energy efficient.
Yeah, right. Yeah, rolling blackouts, that's a real problem. It's a real issue that our growers face, whether you're in California or Michigan. They're real, and the electricity draw that a cannabis grow has, or any indoor grow for that matter, is large, and it does have an impact.
Yeah, I don't know too many other indoor grows that are investing as much as this plant. Yeah, I don't know any heirloom tomato grows.
No. Yeah. I mean, you're starting to see vertical takeoff in that space, right? But nothing like cannabis. Cannabis is leading the way in technology. What cannabis growers are, because of the price per pound of plant, even when you compare where we're at right now, there's still enough profit in there to pay for increased technology, increased control, and getting to where everybody else needs to go.
Yeah. So you have this new lighting system, the Gavita Pro RS 2400E. What makes this light different? Is it patented? Does it have a bunch of new technology we just haven't seen yet?
Yeah. Well, first, it is a 2400 micromole, which means it's capable of putting out at least 1,500 ppfd at the canopy. We believe that's close to the top of what a cannabis plant can consume. Obviously, there's a lot of environmental things that allow you to do that in an effective manner, but that was the goal, is to make a light that can put out the power that a cannabis plant would consume, so you can increase yields. But to do that as efficiently as we possibly could. So we actually went out and designed diodes with diode suppliers that meet the demand of what we wanted to hit, which was 3.0 micromoles per joule. And we did it, right? Like we have Gavita these are Gavita diodes, these are Gavita drivers. These aren't off the shelf options that other people can get. We design these ourselves. Additionally, when you look at like the control of the unit, we have an adapter in it that makes it a smart light. The future of growing is smart, we believe. So, we can control with a Gavita EL3 controller. Each one of the individual lighting fixtures can be controlled with the EL3. So, say you have one room and 2 strains, and it has a different, desire for the type of light and the quality of light that it's going to have. Maybe one's 1200 and one's 1500. You can literally have 2 zones in one room, and run those differently, and you can control each light individually. It tells you the health of the light. It tells you if it's going to continue to make it. And it's just, again, getting smarter with what you're doing, getting smarter with your grow. And we want to help our growers have more information. There's a lot of lack of data, a lot of lack of really understanding at a minute level what's going on in this grow room. And the invention of the Gavita 2400E with our new controller allows really the first step in what we see of more control in the grow room.
Okay. So when you say control, could that be per cultivar, per bay? Wow.
Yep. Every single light can be individually controlled. The same feature is actually on our CTs. So we had the foresight to build adapters into the CT that just weren't turned on yet. So now with the EL3, the CT becomes controllable as well. So you can control, again, if you have an individual cultivar, or you have multiple cultivars in a single grow room, you can really dial it in and control it that way.
So for the EL3 controller, why do people love it so much? Is it more unique than other controllers on the market?
It is, well, one, it's designed to go with our lights, and it will continue to be designed to go with our lights, which is a very important feature to consider when you're buying a controller. You have to test to ensure that controller works with the lights, right? You have to do a safety test. You have to make sure that the computer that's in the LED fixture talks to the computer that's in the lighting fixture, and we did that, and it ensures that your light's going to perform over and over again. It also will. We're going to be launching some sensors here pretty soon, so it accepts sensors so that you can check your soil characteristics. You can check your environmental characteristics through a VPD sensor. And if you're a bigger grower, it also is a slave to your overall building management or environmental management system. So we designed this. It's our first step into a controller of this type of magnitude.
Yeah. So unlocking the power behind all that data. Let's say you have commercial operations all around the world using this technology. Maybe they're even growing the same cultivar. Is Hawthorne able to create a best practices program, or is it more for fueling product innovation internally?
We actually, it's not a Wi-Fi enabled controller, and then we did that on purpose, right? Like that's purpose driven to start with. So really, it's to get a grower used to looking at data and understanding what's going on in the grow. We'll see, and by talking to our growers, what they're willing to accept in the future. Not everybody wants to have what they would consider Big Brother looking over their shoulder about what they're doing or sharing their secret recipes, right? And what we want to do really is just help a grower be more successful, and that is helping them with understanding what's actually going on in the grow room, what made a grow successful. If I go back to my, I'm from the big brand world, big CPG world, and the one thing that you always have to keep in the back of your mind is as you grow and as you expand, you want the same experience if a grower is in California or in Florida or in Michigan, the same experience from that cultivar that they smoke. They want that cultivar for a reason. For a lot of people, it's medicine, and that means that you have to have repeatable processes. Yeah, and that starts with data.
That consistency. I absolutely agree there, dialing it in. So let's talk about energy efficiency for a moment. So I know that you guys have a partnership with Bob Gunn over at Seinergy. What does that program look like? You guys are helping people save a lot of money.
Yeah. So obviously with the electricity challenges in this world, a lot of local, electric companies have rebates and municipalities have rebates to help people pay for LEDs. And that's a process that is very difficult to manage through, to make sure you have all the proper paperwork, you filled it out correctly, you've done it in the right timeline. And we recognize that as a gap that really our growers can't go hire an LED rebate expert. So we have that service as part of our sales process. And, if you're buying a large LED order in an area that offers rebates, we'll connect the dots for you. That's both for our LED business, but also, Quest is one of our partners, and we do that for Quest dehumidifiers as well.
Wow. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Lance. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Nick.
Now let's hear from Walt over at Quest.
So I started working with Quest parent company back in 2005. I got into I was a commercial die cutter. I converted materials, and they used my materials in the construction of the machines. So I started working with Thermistor back then. That was before Quest existed. I started working specifically with Quest when I was still a vendor around 2010. I was working to create what we call our XT platform now, which everybody knows as our 155, 165, 225. I was in charge of making the heat exchanger, which if you've ever looked inside of an XT machine, it's a big black corrugated cross flow exchanger. So that's what drives the efficiency in that previous generation model. That was back in 2012 when that was released to the market. And I've been working here ever since 2015 and really loving it.
Right on. So what is your role at Quest today? I'm sure it's evolved over time.
Yeah, it has. At first I came aboard and they put me in sort of a wide ranging role as a product manager to try to understand various markets and really just actually get in contact with the market and start learning how to work with people and get voice of the customer rather than, just throw out some products out there. And currently my role is the director of product development. I work with our engineers, designers, supply chain, quality, and operations to design and transition into production our newest machines and maintain our product catalog.
Wow. So did you go to school for this, Walt?
So I went to school for business.
Okay.
I knew back then I wanted to make something. I wanted to make something that could be something you could put your hands on. I grew up working on farms to raise money when I was in middle school and high school, and always had a lot of respect for the agriculture world. Both my grandparents had farms, but I wanted to make something. I wanted to put components together, and before I understood what engineering meant, that was my goal in my career.
Right on. So you've been around farming. What about cannabis? Is that a new path for you? Or have you been a cannabis connoisseur for a while?
Yeah, I've always been an East Coast and Midwest resident, and they're not as accepting over here for that. I had my fun in high school and college. But Ohio, where I grew up, and now back here in Wisconsin, Ohio is now, a legalized state, but Wisconsin is not. And sure, I'm familiar with the product and really love the rebirth of the industry.
Yeah. It's going through a lot of growth, and you guys have a pretty good feedback loop. I mean, you're very, tapped into the industry and have a strong innovation cycle from what's happening out in the field to you guys creating new products around those problems. Maybe we can start there. I know energy efficiency is a pretty big theme of this episode. So let's chat about proper humidity control and how Quest helps growers save money around that.
Yeah, there weren't a lot of products catered specifically to the industry, and with our experience in other industries, we recognize that one of those Home Depot units is going to get you around a quarter of the efficiency that our machines can get. They're also not going to last very long, and they also have size constraints. And rather than stacking 15 of those into this tiny little room, what about 2 larger units? And what if we built it in a way that saved you ground space or wall space or table space so that you're not taking up any of the room at the floor level. And this was 2 straight years of not selling any products, just going and talking to growers and working with them and understanding their day-to-day pain points, and literally going in there and unboxing machines, and is it a pain in the butt to get our machine out of the box, and did you bang your knee on it trying to get through the door? Well, we probably need to make this an inch skinnier so it'll fit through a 32-inch door. And there's so many tiny little details that he would preach to sales staff and to product management about. You don't learn this stuff unless you actually get in there and do it and witness it firsthand. And a lot of times, even the growers will not recognize what their pain points are. It's they're cursing, they slammed their thumb on something for the 3rd time, and they're like, God, I hate it when that happens. And you ask the question, like, does that happen a lot? And they're like, every day. It's the worst thing that happens to me every day. It's like, we can fix that.
That's literally a pain point.
Right. And it's a lot of people don't recognize some of the stuff that you go through day to day, and you accommodate instead of saying, boy, why am I doing this? And what if I did it better? And coming into, a Midwesterner like myself that's worked in automotive and aerospace and all these other industries, going into a grow for the first time, all I see is I'm learning left and right. And I'm like, okay, well, why are they doing it this way? This just doesn't make any sense. I mean, over at Samsung, they do this kind of a thing, and it works really well for them. And then you start talking to them, and you figure out where their biggest pain points are. And then you look at their business case, and it is evident from very early date that energy efficiency is a massive contributor to their bottom line. Air conditioning and dehumidification are just naturally large power consumers, and the place where you first look to make the biggest impact is where your biggest consumers are. And we recognized, and the business case was showing, it's like, well, geez, I mean, we could be saving growers $10,000-$15,000 a month, like depending on the scale of the operation, per room. I mean, you're talking about huge numbers when you're talking 20 to 30% better efficiency than something else. So, between, little touches that go into, how the person runs their day-to-day operation, and then into the business case. That's what we do when we go out and talk to people and work with them one-on-one. We're trying to piece those pieces together and ask questions and learn. So we can roll those innovations out into the next generation of product that we're developing.
Right on. Well, over the past probably 5 to 6 years, I have filmed just about every type of Quest setup in commercial facilities and CannaCribs and Deep Roots episodes. And I remember the day that I learned about water reclamation, and going all the way through to that level of efficiency and sustainability. If someone is watching this right now and is not familiar, could you give us kind of a 101 lesson of how that works?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I mean, I'll start right at the beginning. Water that's coming off of a coil in our machines is basically pure distilled water. It's when water is in the air, and when it's being measured as relative humidity, it's literally just the hydrogen and oxygen molecules. You don't have all of the contaminants and metals and I mean, it's nutrients. You don't have any of those extra stuff in there. It's literally just pure water. You're condensing that from the air. You're not really picking any of that up because there's really no source for it. And then that, if you can capture it right then and there, it's water that can be used. The trick is capturing it right then and there, or accommodating the transportation of that. And that's where, we use all E-coated coils so that it doesn't pick up any of the aluminum or copper or heavy metals coming from a manufacturing process. It's our drain pans are high quality ABS, and they're treated, so they're not going to be servicing any bio growth. And we've had our units tested. We've sent our water samples out to a lab here in Lodi, Wisconsin, called what's it called? It's called Water Compliance Specialists, and they've analyzed our water for bacteria, heavy metals, trace contaminants, and anything that, and they've compared that to safe water standards. And there's different levels of safe water. There's water that's safe for like gray water, and there's water that's safe for cleaning and brushing your teeth, and there's water that's safe for consumption. And our water is so clean that it's safe for human consumption. Heavy metals, for instance, we have less than 75 parts per billion, which is better than what you can get out of the ground. That's a good thing, that you have this base you can start from, and you can reclaim that. But you are then going to want to add back in the kind of nutrients that are required, so that the plants are getting what they get, because you're getting just plain naked water at that point.
Yeah. Well, I can really tell, going back to when the 2 years of wilderness exploration, listening to all those problems, they've been implemented, right? And sometimes it's solutions. Hey, it would be cool if it could do this or that. I think inherently growers want to be more sustainable. It's just difficult.
Sure.
At scale. And lighting efficiency, and using LEDs versus an HPS, or working with Quest to reclaim water, and other sustainability aspects. So maybe let's talk about the full suite. You're going out there, showing a grower why Quest is the best. Outside of water reclamation and kind of the increased efficiency for the price point, are there other things engineered into these units?
Sure. So, last year at MJ Biz, we released our Quest 335. And this one, I'll sort of reference this one for some of the stuff, because it is our latest generation of design. We put a lot of thought, as I talked about, into the little features, things like integrated hang kits. So the units all have that 3/8 inch hanging rod that goes right in the top of the machine. It's not a separate kit or anything like that. You've got extreme serviceability, which goes into sustainability, because we don't want to design in obsolescence. We don't want a unit that's only going to work for 4 years and then you got to toss it and get the latest one. We want you to be able to service a machine while we use high quality stuff and we build it well. Nothing lasts forever. So if a compressor needs to be changed out, the 335 was designed so that you don't even need to drop it from the ceiling. All of the panels are removable, and it can be serviced in place, and those components are accessible so that you can replace those components. That was intentionally done from a sustainability point of view. We use what's called a multi-coil system. It's one of our patented features to our machines, and I think we're going to start calling that the M Core. So you'll probably see that terminology starting to get thrown around. What that's allowing us to do is we've got a very wide range of operating temperatures that the unit is going to have its peak efficiency. So in a refrigeration machine, everybody's got to design to a certain set point. Historically, that's been 80 degrees and 60% relative humidity, but not everybody grows at that. Not everybody grows at that throughout the entire operation. There's different periods. So the multi-coil system allows us to tune to more of that 75-55 and have that maintain its peak efficiency and capacity at a higher temperature, lower temperature, higher relative humidity, lower relative humidity. Whereas typical 2-coil machines will see a large drop off. It's a pretty steep bell curve where it operates at peak efficiency at one point, and then as you get either colder or drier, your efficiency drops off pretty significantly. Again, that gets into the cost per pint of water you're getting back out of it. If you're reclaiming it, the more pints you get out for the energy you spend. First of all, it's less money you're spending, but then it's also your water cost would be going down there. We minimize our corrugated packaging. These are typically, visible in a lot of grow rooms. So there are aesthetic requirements. We'd love to be able to get away from boxes completely, but got to protect something when we're shipping it all over the place. But we have a pretty minimal corrugate footprint, which we completely recycle on our side. And then I think the last thing is our machines themselves are fully recyclable, other than the electronic control board component. The coils, all the copper, the cabinet, all the plastic, everything in there, we recycle here in Madison on the production side. And then, if we get a unit returned or traded in or something like that, we also have the ability to reclaim just about all the materials in it. So we do put a lot of thought into feature sets, as well as what can we do to try to make these things as sustainable as possible? Because it is a big part. It's going to be a part of the industry that's scrutinized a lot more going forward. So yeah, we're sensitive to that.
Yeah, I see that already. I mean, there's a lot of states that have some rebate programs, and it's not tied to just lighting.
Right.
So I think it's good. I think it's a win-win-win for everyone. And at the end of the day, we want to consume a clean product. So knowing how it was farmed, how it was processed, produced, etc., goes a long way to be using a product like this. So you know how there's with Moore's law, every year computers are faster and cheaper. Is there a Moore's law equivalent for Quest and the innovation that you guys have?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a great question, actually. I hadn't thought of it that way. I would say yes, and I would say, unfortunately, though, we are very quickly approaching the limits of physics. So, when I first came on board 6 years ago, our most efficient unit was what was it? It was our 155. That does about 8.3 pints per kilowatt hour. And for anyone unfamiliar, that's typically how we cite efficiency, because it's basically for every dollar you're spending, this is how much water you're pulling out. It's the most direct way to address the cost of the unit operation. So at 8.3 pints per kilowatt hour, that was our flagship. That was a huge number then. When that was released, it beat our previous best efficiency by about 2 pints per kilowatt hour. Prior to that, it was 6.3 was the best pints per kilowatt hour. And most 2-coil systems out there without a heat exchanger, you're getting 3 to 4 pints per kilowatt hour. It's nowhere near that. So we took what was already an efficient machine with the 155 and extracted another 30% efficiency out of that. And then last year at MJ Biz, we released our 335, which gets 9.3 pints per kilowatt hour. It was a big jump up. Again, another patent to blame for that. We had our parallel bypass TXV that was invented, and that helped us climb that hurdle over 9. That was a big number for us. We've got a couple of ideas here and a couple of things that we're working on to see if we can push the envelope up and get into that second digit. We'd love to see 10. It's challenging. I think, the engineers are telling me that you're getting to be about 10.5 pints per kilowatt hours is the limits of physics. And that's like a perfect system working in perfect harmony, which we all know is not really realistic in the real world. So we're thinking 10.2, 10.3 is probably the best we could possibly do. And we're going to see if we can get that, but we're getting pretty close.
Yeah. So we can't change physics. That's not happening. So you guys will get to that point relatively quickly. What are future innovations looking like once you hit that benchmark?
Yeah, so I can give you a little bit of a peek. Obviously, a lot of this stuff is pretty top secret. I kind of hinted at it earlier. When you're looking at energy consumption and savings, and maximizing efficiency, you want to look at your biggest contributors first. And I think the biggest contributors, once you've addressed lighting and dehumidification, I think your last one there is going to be your sensible, which is your air conditioning. I think we've got some pretty cool ideas that we're working on, and we've got some disruptive stuff that's coming down the pipe.
Okay, so I know you have this Quest 746.
Yeah.
Where does that enter? Is that for larger facilities?
Certainly. Yeah, that's definitely for larger facilities. That one's our first 480 volt machine. And that was, again, big market demand there. People were looking for, as more and more of these grows are being constructed from scratch and constructed at scale rather than slowly scaling up over time. You're getting these big facilities and you're getting big latent demands. Those lights go off and that temperature crashes, that relative humidity spikes. That's the relationship between temperature and RH, and you need a pretty big hammer to bring that down pretty quickly. And that's what the 746 does. It's a large machine, 750 some pints per day, and it does so on the first 480 volt architecture that we've released. It also uses our multi-coil system. It's based on our 6 series design, which includes our 506 and 876. And the 746, I think, is going to be is probably going to take over for that 876 and be the top of the line here moving forward. It's been a great market response, and I think we're going to ride that.
Yeah. Are there any patents at Thermistor that haven't been picked up yet on the Quest side? Things that, you guys see, future product innovation including?
Oh, geez. Yeah. I mean, we've always got people. We have an IP office, that intellectual property that's basically in charge of making sure that all the ideas our engineers are coming up with are going to be protected. So, I think we own, I want to say it's 27 patents at this time. A couple of these are going to be expiring here because we've been doing this for a little while. So, heat exchangers that, like I talked about with the XT platform, that's what's called LGR technology. It's a technology that Thermistor invented, and that's going to be expiring here. And so you're going to see a lot of people that can start taking advantage of air-to-air heat exchangers that previously weren't able to because we own the patent on it. But that was yesterday's tech. That we've moved forward with the multi-coil system as the primary refrigeration system because of just the massive benefits that you get from it. Multi-coil system is somewhat new still. We released that to the market with our 506, and I believe that was in 2016. And it was the first revolutionary refrigeration design since refrigeration began. Refrigeration has always been a compressor and 2 coils and a fan. And this is the first time that we said, okay, well, what if we added more coils? And so it was the first revolutionary design. You've got a lot going on there trying to balance refrigeration pressures and refrigeration flow across all those coils and all those cavities. And we're learning still about how to optimize that. And that's when we released on the 335, we added that parallel bypass TXV patent, which is complementary to the multi-coil. You can't really have one without the other. We've got a couple other in the queue here that are going to be added to our multi-coil complementary patent portfolio. So when you see some of this disruptive tech that we're talking about towards the end of 2023, there's probably gonna be 2 additional patents on there that we're taking advantage of.
Wow. So over the years, Walt, I'm sure you've seen a lot of best practices and probably a lot of failures. You guys go in and help a facility. What are some of those tips or tricks that you can lend out to commercial growers, and maybe even terminology, things that they should be researching, they should be looking up, they should be focusing on?
Sure. First thing I would say, this was something I was naive to before I came along here. And I think most consumers are naive to this, including most professional consumers in the grow market. So, don't think I'm being critical of anyone with this. Become familiar with the terminology derating. Derating is extremely important to understand this concept, and it ties together it ties together everything from your operating efficiency to your total latent capacity to the cost of your overall operation. Derating is this concept where we call our machines, the number on our machines typically relate to the number of pints per day that it can remove at 80 degrees Fahrenheit and 60% humidity. Again, that's kind of an industry standard that has been carried over from decades of dehumidification manufacturing. At 60, you're not getting that same amount. It's just not possible. So the difference between what you get at 80-60 and the difference at 60-60 is called your derated conditions. And it's going to both reduce your capacity. So, the 335, I don't know off the top of my head, it might get 270 pints per day at those lower conditions. And it also affects your efficiency. Instead of 9.3, you're going to be closer to 7.8 or 7.9. I don't know. I don't have the exact numbers, but the point is your capacity and efficiency changes as your conditions change. Understanding that is important because efficiency isn't just what you're spending to pull water out of the air. A high efficiency machine like ours also put less heat into the room. So if you understand your derating, you also understand how to better size your air conditioning. With a Quest machine, you don't need as much air conditioning because they are more efficient. So it's not just the money you spend on pulling water out. It cascades into your other systems. It's complicated. And there are people that spend years and get PhDs on how to get all of this sorted out. Just reach out to our tech service folks and they can give you all of our curves. They can work with engineering, refrigeration engineers and HVAC engineers to design the total system so that you hate to get someone says, well, I only need 500 pints of water removal. So I bought a 506. It's like, yeah, but you need 500 pints of water removal at 55 degrees, not at 80 degrees. So you need two 506s. It's easier to know that up front than it is later on. So get familiar with derating. That's a big part that I think a lot of people don't realize, and they do start to realize over time the hard way.
Yeah. So in closing here, Walt, how does Quest and Hawthorne work together to bring this industry-leading innovation to the end grower?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we were able to partner, luckily, with Hawthorne early on when we were still pretty small. And what we needed then was a distribution channel. We're a small Midwest manufacturer that serviced residential and large industrial stuff, dairy farms and things like that. We have a fantastic engineering team. We've got some brilliant sales folks, but we don't have the Amazon type logistics to be sending units to all these different farms and retailers all over the United States. And that's what Hawthorne brings. They are able to, through their distribution centers and distribution network, properly support the channel, while we are better off spending our time and resources on innovation, on producing a quality product and improving our manufacturing capabilities. If we had to focus on shipping and returns and just-in-time stocking and all that, we wouldn't be able to spend as much on those other things that the market benefits from. The other thing is they can bundle things. They've got so many different products in their catalog that you're not just going there to buy a DHU or a light. I mean, you're outfitting your whole operation, and that means you get economies of scale from that. And that's definitely unique to Hawthorne in this channel, and it's unique. We don't have any other partners in any other channel doing that kind of thing. So Hawthorne, love that relationship, and it's going to be around for a while.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I want to give a special shout out to Keith, everyone over on the Quest side, including yourself, Walt. Thank you for dropping some knowledge today and educating our growers.
Right on. I appreciate being here, Nick. It was a good time.
Now let's hear from Bob over at Seinergy.
I've been in the energy efficiency space in the utility sector since 2008. And I work on the demand side management side of the coin. So not so much where power comes from, which would be renewables or power plants, but how we use energy. And then importantly, how we can influence the reduction in energy. So when you're in that world, you look for where energy is used most and where emerging technologies or industries happen. So when cannabis went legal in 2014, I'm based here in Washington State near Seattle. I showed up with an open mind, started talking to growers and trying to just understand the energy profile, and also understand what the efficient opportunities were and what growers were doing. And, near and dear to my heart, how they were engaging with their utilities, if at all. And I was met with many blank stares. They didn't know how to engage with the utility. They just took power from the utility, and they were grateful for that. So I, just started offering to help forge some relationships with the utility and say, hey, if you're interested. At the time, it was most of the energy efficiency opportunities were around lighting. At the time, it was CMH lighting. Even double-ended lighting was really the efficient option versus single-ended. So we'd go procure, we'd procure grants for checkerboards, CMH, double-ended. It was much more efficient than a single-ended grow, about 35% more efficient. So we'd get grants from the utilities to help growers invest in that technology. This is 2015, 16. The LEDs were now nowhere near where they are today.
Right.
There were still some. We would do LED grants, but the technology's come a long ways in the last 7 years. So I found myself in a position of saying, hey, I can speak grower enough to understand what you're doing and what you'd like to do from an efficiency standpoint. but also how to translate that into a grant from the utility, and also forge a relationship with the utility so they can have an energy management conversation. It starts with lighting, but it can go to HVAC, and it can go to load shaping and even peak shifting and things like that offer benefits both to the growers in terms of reduced rates and operating expenses, but also to the utilities. So that's really how it started in Seattle for me. Late 2014, early 2015. Just started working with growers, and one by one, we, word of mouth and referrals, we started doing more of these grants, and it spread from there.
That's incredible. I'm actually from north of Seattle, a small town called Arlington.
Yeah, there's a lot of growers up in Arlington.
I moved in 2008, and then the cannabis industry took off like around that time. So I haven't really been able. I filmed the Fat Panda episode, one of our, I think it's like episode 2, early on, but I haven't really gone back and done a tour of the Washington market. So you've been there since day one, really helping that industry take off.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Arlington. I worked for Snohomish PUD. You probably recognize that name.
Yeah,
that was your utility. So I worked there for 5 years and learned enough about how utilities operate, and why they spend money on things that happen behind the meter, and why they help customers use less energy, given that they make money on selling kilowatt hours. But we won't go too deep into those economics right now, unless you want to. But yeah, it's a mutually beneficial equation. That's kind of it's a nice balance point. It's beneficial for the participant, beneficial for the utility, and beneficial for all the other rate payers. So there's all sorts of benefit cost tests that we look at. And so I learned all that up in Snohomish County, North Seattle, and the concepts are pretty much the same all throughout the country, whether it's a publicly owned utility or an investor-owned utility or a municipal utility. The concepts are the same. Sometimes the rules and the terms and conditions vary slightly, but that's what we help navigate.
Wow. So you started in Washington. Have you expanded to other markets since then?
Absolutely. Yeah. We do very little work in Washington now. Most of our work follows legalization efforts. So it was a lot of Washington, Oregon, Colorado back in 15 and 16. And the past couple of years have been a lot of Oklahoma and Michigan. And there's a lot of interest in some jobs, but in New Jersey and New York and Maine and other markets like that. California is a special market, difficult to do business in, but it's so big that we can't help but keep trying. But yeah, we follow the industry around in that regard. And now we're still seeing in, let's say, the first mover markets, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, more retrofits happening. People have existing facilities. They've weathered a few storms and they're ready to reinvest. And the technology from lighting has come to a point where they feel more confident retrofitting more than just a sample room, but maybe all 10 flower rooms from HPS to LED. Now's the time for that. The incentives are still good, and that's probably a time-limited thing. They won't be the same 5 years from
forever.
now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, we work remotely for the most part. I love getting inside of grows, but it's not required for us to weigh in and help advise and consult with growers.
I almost see you as like a hired gun. I mean, you're Bob Gunn. You're a hired gun, and you go out there and you help these operators collect that money that's just sitting on the table.
Yeah.
Right. Some of them just probably don't know that they can have access to these rebate programs and can, maybe purchase these products. It might be a little bit more expensive at times, but if you're not really looking at the creative financing or creative economics behind it, it's going to be tough to compete.
Yeah, it is. We are a bit of a hired gun. We're advocates for the grower. They often don't know that you can ask the utility for grant funding, that it even exists. But almost every utility, not everyone, but almost every utility has a pot of money that everyone pays into. And it's simply a grant you ask, and it's on a custom basis. Most utilities don't say, there's not a PDF that says, for grow lighting, here's the offer, $100 a light. As markets mature, we're seeing more prescriptive programs, and that's great because it reduces the paperwork burden, and you don't need a hired gun. So that's progress as far as making it more mass, one size fits all prescriptive programs. But early on, yeah, we talk with the utilities about that, and rebates are the foot in the door in that energy management conversation. But often there's better rates that they can be on. There's load shifting or demand response, like we've seen in markets like California, where there's a lot of stress on the grid during narrow windows of time. There's other things that can help the utility is willing to pay for that will benefit the grower in multiple ways.
Wow.
Mhm.
So I've been familiar with yourself and Seinergy for probably 6+ years. I know nowadays you have a pretty great relationship and partnership with Hawthorne. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. Oh, we love working with Hawthorne. We started working with Hawthorne when they got into the LED game.
Oh,
So
okay.
they had the Sun System and the Gavita brand, very strong brands in the horticulture lighting and cannabis lighting space. But it was around 2018 that they really made a big play with the 1700E, that fixture, and I'd already been working with them kind of in a friendly, arm's length way. They had if they had a customer that could use help with a rebate, we would help that customer. But around that time, they were scaling up, just following the industry. And around that time, I was able to get more involved with them. And they asked me to go exclusive with them because I had been, I kind of said, I'm vendor agnostic. I'll serve whatever the grower wants to buy. I'll help them buy those fixtures. My goal is just to, help them buy the efficient fixtures, whatever it is, and help the utility pay for that so it can change their own economics. But yeah, around that time, I went exclusive with Hawthorne, and that allowed me to work much more closely with the technical services team and the sales team and even the government affairs team to make sure that we're understanding different policies that underpin these rebate programs, or even energy disclosure and resource disclosure requirements that certain states are thinking about or considering. We work with the grower community, a lot of trade associations, to bring the grower's voice to the table, to say this type of regulation is reasonable, or this type of data disclosure requirement is reasonable, but this thing over here is not so reasonable. It just doesn't work for us. So that's been great. It's been a couple years now of working just with Hawthorne, and they're chasing the market. So we scaled up as a team. I was able to hire a few more people, scale up some of our databases, and make some efficiencies in the.
I'm sure that you guys have been tracking since the inception of your company how much rebates or savings that you've had for your customers. Do you have kind of a lifetime savings number that you can talk about today?
Yeah, we track how many approved applications we have. And it's about $34 million. And
whoa,
yeah, just I think 32 of that is cannabis. So there's been a couple indoor veggie growers.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's 32
they count
million.
As well.
Yeah,
We'll
again, we are generally crop agnostic. It's all progress. It's resource efficiency. We love that industry too. And I think that industry is learning a lot from cannabis, and especially horticultural lighting. I think cannabis can take a lot of credit for really moving the needle on that and making the investments. In any case, yeah. So let's say $32 million in cannabis growers, and that's funds into the growers' pockets that we've had approved. Yeah.
Are there any states that are like outliers as far as cost savings?
Yes, there's some states that have really invested in understanding the use case for horticulture lighting and made it a little easier to participate. Oregon stands out, Washington stands out, Colorado's been great, and Michigan, and Oklahoma too. These, they strike a good balance of wanting to fund energy efficiency but being business friendly too, so there's not too many barriers to entry. There's other states have taken a different approach to energy management that just kind of make it harder to get rebates, even though I think they're well intended. I don't need to talk about that.
Yeah, we won't. Yeah, we won't call them out.
Yeah,
they know who they are. Probably.
Yeah, but those are all great states, and they've really leaned into it despite other political barriers where their boards might say, you don't know if we want to serve these customers. They say, no, we're a monopoly. We have a duty to serve, and we're going to serve these customers just like anybody else. And if we can influence them to use less, there's a benefit to everyone, just like retrofitting a restaurant or a school or anything like that.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about these utility companies wanting them to use less of their product. Could you scratch the surface on that?
Yes, I think the soundbite that comes to mind is that utilities invest in energy efficiency because it's the lowest cost resource. So when utilities look at what we call an integrated resource plan, we look out 30 years. This is what I did in my utility days, and say, okay, we're going to have load growth that's maybe 3 to 5% per year. How are we going to meet that load growth? You can either build new power plants and new transmission lines and substations and all the infrastructure to get that to people, or you can reduce the amount that people are using behind the meter. And reducing it is energy efficiency is often considered the first fuel. It's the most cost-effective way to meet load growth for utilities. So for about 10 cents on the dollar, utilities can help you and I use less, and they can meet the load growth without having to build a new power plant and then operate that power plant for 50 years. So it's an economic argument that it's a net benefit for everyone, even though it's a cost. And utilities do spend...
It's an opportunity cost comparison.
Absolutely. And utilities do spend $9 billion a year, from their capital budget, and they can capitalize these expenses too. That helps from a regulatory standpoint, so they can earn a rate of return on these expenses and energy efficiency. But that all goes to save, let's just say in rough numbers, $30 billion in having to build other infrastructure and then feed those power plants or maintain those substations and transmission lines. So yeah, it's the lowest cost resource for the utilities, and it's a benefit to the participant. And what it does for all the other ratepayers is it reduces them from market exposure. So it reduces the risk of more price fluctuations or greater rate increases.
That makes complete sense. Speaking to sustainability, I know right now we're having a lot of concerns around electrical consumption, water consumption, maybe talking a little bit more about the energy consumption that you're focusing on. What does the sustainability of the cannabis industry look like over the next 5 years? Where are we heading?
I think we're heading towards more electrification of everything, including the cannabis industry. But I mean, transportation and all food and even other fuel production. I think the cannabis industry should expect more scrutiny and requests for disclosures about resource use. And the primary resource use in indoor would be electricity and water. And in greenhouse, there's a substantial amount of gas used often for nighttime heating and CO2. But I think a more carbon disclosures and energy benchmarking is going to be required. We're seeing some states add into statute or into law that they're going to require that growers disclose how much they're using. The next natural step after that is to regulate how much they're using. And part of our policy angle is to encourage states to collect data first and get grower participation before saying you can use this many, kilowatt hours per square foot or kilowatt hours per gram. Is it dry weight? Is it wet weight? There's a lot of subjectivity and difficulty when you get down to that level. But I think just starting with disclosing how much energy is used, and water for that matter, is a reasonable ask of regulators. And it's not unfounded. The real estate industry in many cities requires something similar. For any building over a certain size, it's typically 50,000 square feet. They say you just need to say how much resources you're using so that tenants or investors or your community can just understand and identify where the outliers are. The beautiful thing is that the simple act of benchmarking is proven to increase energy efficiency because it will identify where there are outliers, or it'll identify that maybe a chiller has failed or some pump has failed and this thing is working harder than it should, or it's working harder than the facility next door. So I think we should expect that. An increase in energy use is an interesting subject. I have a hypothesis that the energy use is going down in the cannabis industry as we move from illicit to regulated market, because illicit grows, the ones we've seen, the one that have been profiled in various academic articles. I can't say they're really studies because they haven't sampled 200 growers, but they've profiled these grows that use maybe a single-ended fixture with some off-the-shelf environmental controls that you might pick up at a Home Depot versus a commercial scale, a facility. You've seen the beautiful facility of the world with sliding tables, and the light is optimized, and the HVAC and the water recapture is all optimized. The latter uses resources much more efficiently because they're allowed to make an investment that they expect will be there for 5 years versus a short-term thing that might be not fully legal. So
rated overnight and taken down. Yeah,
exactly.
Completely different mindset.
It's a different mindset. And yeah, energy efficiency typically pays out over a certain period of years, whether it's 2 years or 4 years. That seems like a reasonable mindset. But in the old days, the illicit days, often it was, you set up your grow, you get one harvest and pay for the equipment, you get a second harvest and make profit and tear it down and move on. that's not really built for sustainability and long-term resource stewardship. So
that makes sense.
So yeah, we are seeing an increase nationwide. Some of the reports say we expect 1% of the electricity use is attributed to cannabis. I think it's 0.5 to 1% is a reasonable number. But then, you know, the like I say, the counterculture in me says, well, how much was it when it was illegal? Was it 2%? Did it go from 2% to 1%? Or are we consuming more cannabis now as a country and going from, 0.5% to 1%? I think the jury's out, and certainly the data's not there. But that circles back to why we could start to collect data about what's actually being used now. I think that'd be a really great first step.
Who is collecting that? Private sector, public sector, utility? Where are those benchmarks and data collection coming from?
Nobody.
Now, zero.
Currently, nobody's collecting that. There have been some states like Massachusetts who have required that you do a resource disclosure. You have to say, this is how many kilowatt hours you use, this is how many therms of gas I use, and I don't know if it includes water, but let's just say this is how many gallons of water. And then for all the licensed operators, they could roll that up and publish how much it actually is, and then look at the total consumption of the state and see if it validates that 1% figure, or if it's higher or lower. You could go further, and if you knew the yield, the dry weight yield, you could say this is how many kilowatt hours per gram for the state, and you could subsample. But they've collected the data. I don't think they've done it in such a way that they have structured data and can report those things. I think it's a missed opportunity. So that is something we're encouraging new states to do, is to collect this data, but also work with the evaluation community, or a group like the Resource Innovation Institute, who can structure structure the data and have it be statistically significant and an unbiased sample, and provide a real talking point and a conversation starting point. I think Mendocino County started doing that. So they'll have some real data to share, hopefully. But currently no one, it's people like me with a spreadsheet, evaluating a facility and doing a bottoms up analysis. And here's how much I think each facility is using on a per square foot basis, and extrapolating to the market. But we haven't done that top down calibration. And utilities, believe it or not, don't know necessarily who's a cannabis grower and who's not. They're not a rate class that says cannabis. Just like they might know from what's the load from restaurants, because it's easier to see them, but I don't think they have a real report out that they can say, here's the actual load from the cannabis industry. So that top-down calibration hasn't happened yet. I think it's ripe at a larger level, beyond individual utilities. They often, because of the federal illegality, I think it's not been studied in the same way that when I worked at the utility, we would study appliances to understand the average age of refrigerators. And we do that on a regional level, even with national or federal funding. But we haven't done that kind of macro study, I think, because of the taboo of the industry.
Yeah. Well, there's friction on both sides of the table, because I would imagine there could be the argument, well, if we track it and we have benchmarks, we're going to be taxed for it, or we're going to be regulated for it. So there could be friction on the adoption side. And then, as you just mentioned, on the enforcement side, on the utility side, there could be friction from a taboo sense.
Yes, there definitely could be taboo. I will say I work on a handful of other like USDA subcommittees, and they're looking at CEA, Controlled Environment Ag, which is a broad term for growing plants indoors or in a controlled greenhouse versus an open hoop house, let's say. And they're starting to, I think, lay a lot of the foundation for, like I said earlier, how we should define buildings, how we should define energy uses within buildings. Because previously, horticulture lighting is not part of energy codes, for example. It's just a manufacturing process. But we've identified this is big enough that it should be its own thing, and should be at least cataloged and documented independently, because it's important enough. It's a big enough load that it can have, if we know where it is and how big it is and how it behaves, then the grid, let's say, can influence when it's used, or they can send an economic signal to help shape that. So we're defining those things, CEA, but USDA is starting to do that type of thing. And I think part of our, again, another policy angle that we always encourage any new state that's trying to regulate cannabis is to say, let's zoom out and do this on a crop agnostic standpoint. We shouldn't regulate the energy use of adult use cannabis different than medical use cannabis, different than hemp or tomatoes, but that's how it's been handled thus far. It's individual agencies that haven't had really an energy management or energy code background starting to, well-intended, starting to put forth some language that sometimes it's a signal that they're trying to engage and trying to participate, but it's not coordinated with the adjacent county or city council or state. So yeah, there's good efforts out there, but zooming out to a bigger level, whether it be a national energy code level, or there's some engineering societies that have long names that seem like a good fit for identifying, what's happening from an energy use and how we should define this stuff, and then ultimately regulate it.
Yeah. Well, at the time of this recording, we have Hurricane Ian impacting Florida on a massive scale. So just natural disasters in bucket 1, and then bucket 2, just over tapping energy grids. I've been on previous tours in the past where, we're all set up to film at facility A, and the power's not working. Like, the power goes off, and we learn that it's been happening multiple times, and we have to go to another facility and go film that. What's our backup plan? We can't necessarily plan for everything, but what happens when a natural disaster strikes, or there is a power outage related to something? What happens? How do you power a facility?
Oh my gosh, I'm glad you asked that. Grid resiliency is kind of this new term. I'd say resiliency as a term is the new sustainability or the new green, but it's much more based on economics and like physical infrastructure. I would say the short answer is microgrids. It's something we're going to be hearing a lot about. I've attended a few microgrid conferences in the past 6 months. Yeah, a microgrid would be what you can do on a micro level. Your house could be a microgrid where you might say, when the power goes out, I don't need everything, but I might want to keep my refrigerator running, or maybe I have a well pump or a septic system that needs to be running, or some medical equipment. So I'm going to prioritize these critical loads to make it through the power outage, whether it's 2 hours or 72 hours. And a lot of schools and hospitals have always had microgrids. Hospitals have huge generators to run critical equipment, elevators, medical equipment, for example. But this concept of having combination of generation and storage assets on a site is what a microgrid would be. So, for example, a lot of growers will ask me, they say, I want to put solar on my roof, and I hear the incentives are good. I'll say, solar's great, but are you trying to achieve that to offset 10% of your load to say that you're being more sustainable, or do you want power when the grid fails you? And I say, oh no, I want power when the grid fails you. I say, well, you need batteries for that solar, or some generator to complement that. And when you design these things, you should be cognizant of the grid and when the grid has pain points, because you could maybe peak shave. You could run your generators or dispatch your batteries to avoid peaks, which will ease the grid, and you can even get paid for that. And when the grid goes out, of course, you can now be self-sustaining for a period of time. I think identifying critical loads and being able to make it through a 72-hour power outage is a great design scenario for any facility. And say a large facility in Florida. There's some big ones down there. Let's say they have 3 megawatts of power, but when a hurricane comes through or just some inclement weather, they might say, I don't need to run the lights at full blast, but I need to maintain photo period. I need to maintain the environmental controls. We can't have humidity get out of check. And I need to maintain the security of the building. Maybe they can get away with half a megawatt load instead of 3 megawatts to weather that storm, literally. So that would be a microgrid, is planning for that contingency, which unfortunately is increasingly common. We're seeing power outages everywhere.
Why is that?
Well, the grid's becoming increasingly intermittent. We're investing in a lot more renewables. And with that, we need to balance the grid, right? And renewables have very, very low marginal cost. And from a carbon standpoint, and this emphasis on carbon output of the grid is going to be a large part of our life. It's not going away. But we need to balance that either with storage or by shaping the demand, how we use energy behind the meter again. So we've been investing huge amounts in renewables, mostly wind and large scale solar, and also in batteries. And these batteries aren't necessarily at a substation. They'll be at a grow, or they'll be at someone's home, or a restaurant or a grocery store. All these batteries that will be there to provide backup power to use to charge when the sun's shining, for example, and maybe to discharge during peak hours in the afternoon. We're going to see a huge influx of microgrids across all sectors.
Are we talking like a Tesla Powerwall type battery?
Yeah, that'd be the residential scale example of that.
Okay.
Tesla makes megapacks, and they're 1 megawatt trailer size, 40-foot container size. It looks like a big old generator, but it's just big batteries. That's one. Energy storage and shifting loads with other materials, whether it's pre-cooling a business or phase shift materials that might take on extra heat and dispatch it later. There's other ways to shift energy that's not electrical, with mechanical or thermal energy storage. But shaping all that is real. Again, back to the beginning of the conversation, exists on the demand side of the equation. How we're using energy interacts closely with the supply of energy. But the days of just shoving more gas and coal into the power plant because demand's going up, we've hit limits on how much of that we can do.
Really, we're at capacity.
Yeah. And the transmission system, we're talking national stuff now. That supersedes the cannabis industry, but the transmission infrastructure, it probably needs to double over the next, I don't know the time frame, but it needs to double to meet population growth and the electrification of everything. Not just electrification of growing plants indoors, just food and medicine.
Everything to live.
Electrification of transportation, and the decarbonization of the economy. That's a big term that's used. It means less use of natural gas for even domestic hot water heating and space heating. It's going to be all electric with heat pumps and heat pump water heaters and electric transportation. That's all going to be great from a carbon standpoint, but it might translate to us in the cannabis industry as more variable rates. Much more emphasis on time of day of when you're using energy. So we are working with a lot of growers with some really cool software. It's off the shelf where we can get 15-minute increment from their bills, and we can see that their lights are coming on, say, from 6 to 6. That's a pretty common thing. But from 4 to 9 is the summer peaks. That's the peaks where the grid is screaming for help, saying we really need less powered from 4 to 9 p.m. So simply shifting from 4 to 4 instead of 6 to 6, if it works for the labor force, can provide a lot of grid benefits. And if you reach out to the utility and work with them and ask them, is this most beneficial to you? What's it worth to you to help us shift this off permanently? Or is it just worth it for you just these 10 days a year? Should we just dim the lights during those 2 hours and maybe put in some switch gear and some communication protocols? There's opportunities like that to work with the grid. That that's not a microgrid. That's just demand side management. There's definitely funding for that. There's a lot of benefits for it. So beyond rebates, that's some of the stuff that we're advising clients on how to make sense of, because that is the future. It's much more focused on not just the kilowatt hours used per year. I'd say that is a good metric to know, but the kilowatt hours per hour is really what the grid cares about.
Right. So, excuse me. Hypothetically speaking, Bob, let's say tomorrow you are opening up your own cannabis cultivation facility, and your number one goal is to maximize your energy rebate potential and save as much money as possible.
Yes.
What state would you open up in? What type of grow operation would you build? What hours would you be running? What lights would you be using? What does that dream facility look like for the pinnacle of, energy efficiency and rebates?
Well, I'd have to say the winner for energy rebates is Northern Michigan. Well, it's Michigan, like Consumers Energy in Michigan. It's the Lower Peninsula, but the non-Detroit part of it. They have just some of the best incentives. They've really invested in outreach and making the programs simple to use. And so if you're going with an LED, you can get excellent incentives depending on the cost of the LED, maybe 60 to 90% of the LED. Sometimes they offer bonuses where you can even get 100%. They had some, that went through September 15th. So LEDs for sure, and high efficient dehumidification. I think standalone dehumidification, there's some really great efficiency gains there with certain brands like Quest. There's integrated HVAC-D, where there's a single system that does a whole building HVAC and dehumidification, and those are excellent, but they involve much more engineering. So if I was an average Joe putting up a modest size, say a 5,000 square foot grow, I would just go with really high efficient dehumidifiers and LEDs. And whether you go vertically stacked or single tier, there's great solutions for all of those. And water, I would say there's not huge water incentives yet, but water is becoming increasingly scarce. And we can see that primarily throughout the West, but there's drought hitting everywhere. And so I would add some really good, water recapture from both your dehumidification system and your flood tables, and try to reuse that as many times as possible, and try to at least understand, if not capture and quantify your wastewater. That's what I would focus on. I think that will give you a competitive advantage and some better staying power in the market. So Michigan's great, but also second runners up would be Oregon and Washington, and the Front Range of Colorado is also pretty forward thinking with working with growers to get rebates for these things I mentioned, but also looking at new things, new control strategies. For example, you can do that maybe sunset to sunrise. There's utilities that have the engineering appetite to look at those and realize, HPS, we didn't have the same dimming opportunities. It's kind of on or off. You might dim a little bit, but they're actually not that efficient when at part loads. Whereas LEDs, you could do a sunrise to sunset on a daily basis or over a 10-week period, and that results in fewer hours or fewer kilowatt hours used to match what the plant needs. So all those places are really good opportunities.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And for a commercial grower, let's say option one, they're building out a new facility and want to hire you, what that process looks like. And then kind of option two, let's say you're already running and you're watching this interview and you're like, okay, I've heard about it. Now I know I'm leaving money on the table. I need to hire Bob and his team. What do those different paths look like in working with your team?
Sure. Almost always, you have to apply before you buy equipment. So whenever someone's in the design phase and they're getting quotes from the vendors, since we work so closely with the Hawthorne team, they'll send over a quote saying this client in New Mexico, we got one this morning, is looking at 400 lights. Can you give us an idea of what's possible from a rebate standpoint? So we'll do that all day long. And then if they think that they're going forward that path, we encourage them to start working with us and, give us permission to you go to the utility on their behalf. So that's where we are an owner's rep, right? It's not power of attorney. That's too legal sounding, but they authorize us to speak on their behalf to say, okay, grower, utility, this grower wants to put these 400 lights in. They're expensive, but compared to the HPS, this is how much it will save. So we'll start to negotiate that before they buy anything. So it's almost always best to start ahead of time. Not a year ahead of time, but 3 to 6 months is a good time frame. Most utilities take about 3 months to do the final approval, because for most utilities still, especially in new markets, they're learning about it and they need to scratch their head and make sure they're modeling this correctly. Whereas markets like Oregon and Colorado, they've done 150 of these. They understand grow lighting. So there's that. But if someone's already bought something or they're in the process of closing it, it's never too late to give it a shot. So we'll look at that. We'll look at, again, we always start with LEDs, but oftentimes when people are making the transition from HPS to LEDs, say it's a retrofit, they're going to add new dehumidification. But if depending on their dehumidification choice, they can also get incentives for those. So we'll look for everything there that is not just an easy win, but meaningful enough. And then there's one other thing, new construction. It's kind of a misunderstanding that you can't get incentives unless you're retrofitting. That's not true in most places. In most places, we will show them what we're going to install and compare it to let's call it a fictitious or a modeled baseline. Say, this is what I would have used if first cost is my biggest primary driver. So that's fine. But there's some markets where retrofits really are the only path forward. And California, I mentioned, is a tricky one, but there are some special programs right now. And, due to the state of the grid, Governor Newsom did declare a grid emergency and appropriated $150 million for retrofits. And they're really interested in reducing the actual load, not compared to what you would otherwise build, but if you can actually retrofit and lower the loads, the incentives there, they're complicated, but they're very, very lucrative. It could pay for the whole lighting system, depending on if you're using, on peak hours or off peak hours, it's going to be worth, $500 a light or $1,200 a light. And
Wow.
if you're using on peak and you can reduce it and at the same time shift off peak, it can be highly lucrative. So it's never too early to talk to us. We do a lot of talking with growers. We work with the designers, but also the technical services team when they're doing lighting designs to help them understand, how the design considerations or the fixture purchase decisions are going to affect rebate eligibility and the timing of that too.
That's great to know. So you actually work with the Hawthorne 360 and tech services team. You're like embedded in that process.
Yes.
Wow.
We're embedded in that process as much as we can. There's a lot going on, but we try to get involved, or at least ask them to flag us anytime there's an LED project being specified for a client. I'll say anything over 50 lights. If it's too small, sometimes it won't be eligible for rebates if it's on a custom basis. But yeah, we ask them to just let us know, and we'll just let the client know, hey, there's $20,000 available for these lights that you want to buy. And depending on where,
it's a no-brainer.
It's kind of a no-brainer. Yeah. If someone's lucky enough to be in some of these markets that have these prescriptive programs, we'll say, oh yeah, you're in with that utility. You can probably do this rebate yourself. Here you go. Otherwise, we'll say, well, this is going to be complicated. It's going to be a 6-month process. Let us get in the driver's seat and take it for you. But yeah, we try to get involved as much as we can. There's other folks who will say, we have a person on our team who used to work at utilities. Say, great, just want to make sure that you have that box checked. Don't leave the money on the table because it's use it or lose it. And if you do buy and install, you probably will miss out. So yeah, working with the tech services team and the sales team is a big part of our daily business.
Right on. So should growers reach out to you directly? Should they go through Hawthorne 360? How do they get to you and your team?
Yeah, any of the above. I'd say most of the leads come through the tech services team or someone like a salesperson at GrowersHouse who's talking with the customer, and they'll either email us or on our website we have, hopefully it's easy to find, request an estimate button, and anyone can fill that out. It's a public facing form. And it's the same form for dehumidifiers or LEDs. And from that, the first question we always have is, where are you located? And if you know it, who's your utility? If someone says we're in Phoenix, we'll say, great. Well, there's 2 utilities and their service territories are kind of like overlapping. It's kind of, one side of the street you'll be with SRP or APS. So we'll ask that first question, who's your utility? Because based on that, we might say, okay, great. You can probably get a 25% utility, or maybe it's only a 10% utility. But regardless, we'll do those estimates all day long. We do thousands of those a year and try to track them and try to follow up with folks. So yeah, and anyone can reach out to us anytime. But yeah, like they say, there's the sales team might text us, but we like to have a little structured. So we have a small team. It goes into the project queue and we turn those estimates around right away.
Right on. So what final piece of advice would you have for any growers out there watching this that are, looking to become more efficient, more sustainable, and maybe they're not working with you today?
I would say, reach out to us. Consider energy efficiency a net benefit, and investments in premium equipment a benefit, not an expense. It's just a reframing the time scale. $1,000 light will probably cost you way less than a $300 light if you just zoom out a little bit to 2 years, and also consider increasing energy rates. And also look at the full picture of your facility, and like you say, consider these other grid resiliency things, and other, try to understand what policies are coming down the pipeline. So, I'd say reach out to us anytime. We do the rebates is the primary tool in our toolbox, but the energy advisory side of the business, where we're kind of reading the tea leaves and saying, oh, in Florida, this type of natural disaster threat is increasingly common, and also these type of different Florida, for example, the rebates are really weak in Florida in general. and Georgia and the Southeast, they don't pay a lot in incentives, but there might be some incentives for load shifting or being able to do demand response. So you might have some different controls you might want to add. So planning ahead is worth a lot in the energy efficiency and demand side management world. And I'd say reach out to us anytime. And we'll, I'm glad to talk to you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for all your time today, Bob. And yeah, I'll make sure to link your website there to fill out that estimate, and we'll start helping growers.
Thanks so much, Nick. It's a pleasure chatting with you.
Jason from Greenlabel Cannabis.
Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me on today and giving me this opportunity to talk with you. But I've been in the space for a little, it depends on what you consider starting, like first getting introduced to cannabis and kind of working with it. That was around 1996, 97. So I've been dealing with it. I'm from here in Southern California, but I grew up in Northern California.
Okay.
So I have a rich history of the original cannabis market and things that took place in Northern California. That's what really introduced me to cannabis. And then I've been in Southern California for about 20 years. Started growing indoors here, and the rest is history, man. So I've been going at it for a long time, a little over 20 years. Been really pushing indoor cultivation since about 2003 is when I really went for it. And it's just been a beautiful ride. I mean, a lot of ups, a lot of downs, and a lot of all around. You just don't know what's going to happen in this space. But, here we are, 20 plus years later, we're doing legal cannabis cultivation, doing what I love every day. So I'm extremely blessed to be able to do it.
Yeah. What was that transition like over the years, kind of encroaching upon this now legal Cali market?
Well, for me, it was, it was pretty crazy. Like I've like I said before, I've been through the highs and lows. So I've been incarcerated for cannabis. And that was at a point right when we were getting ready to legalize medicinal use here in California. And I'd had a Prop 215 collective. I had scripts. I had a bunch of members that I used to cultivate for and provide their medicinal cannabis. And I was raided, my whole entire family. We were raided at multiple different locations. So I went through hell at one point, ended up being incarcerated for what I was doing. And then I was able to be blessed with a social equity license here in Southern California from that arrest. And, the rest is history, man. I've got like thousands of lights up now. I'm doing what I love. And so as much as I can say, yeah, when we first started getting into it, it was exciting. It was dangerous. And we kind of went along with everything that was coming our way. At one point, I thought I would never do this again. I thought I was done. I thought, wow, I'm not going to do this. I can't live this type of lifestyle. But here we are, I'm now able to transition into the legal industry. It's been amazing. It's been a great ride for me. I'm a huge believer of the medicinal value of cannabis. So it's my daily medicine. I consume, I grow, I live it. Everything I do, I breathe, eat, and that's it. It's all about this plant. So super excited to still be in the industry and also to have a seat at the table.
Yeah. And it's almost like the resiliency that you went through and were forced, it now has prepared you with a different mindset and a different skill set to approach the challenges in the current market, like taxation and all the challenges. Every state's different, but I know California's trying to right their wrongs there, but it's really a unique breed that your background comes from. So much respect to you and all that you've built.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man. Thank you. It's like you said, it's we're going through it right now. Most people understand what's happening in the space today, presently in California. We're at a low. We're dealing with cannabis kind of goes along the route of whatever's happening with the economy. We kind of feel it. The negative, if it's a negative economy, cannabis is a hard market to be in. And but I have thick skin. I've been through this, so we're here to survive it and continue to push. So we know that this is an important time in cannabis. Yesterday, they announced some changes on the federal level. So there's a lot of excitement. We just need to be able to get through whatever's going to come our way. And there's just so much to look forward to at the end of that road, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and it truly is a blessing to be able to do what we love every day. I would imagine the majority of the people around the world are working to live, you know, and to be able to grow this plant and be in full alignment with what you're doing professionally. It's so rewarding.
Oh man, beyond. I sometimes I pinch myself and I'm like, man, am I really here? Am I really doing this? This is amazing. Because when I first started doing this, I would sit back and be like, man, this is what I want to do. I enjoy just being in the garden. You know, it was just such a peaceful place for me. And I was like, this was so much better than the stress of some other jobs that I had at the time that I was trying to find my way. And this was amazing. It was, you know, people dream that they can come and do what I do every day. And so, like I said, I always use the word blessed, but I'm extremely blessed, man.
We're floating. Yeah, it's like a dream, bro.
Yeah, right. Just even sitting here having this conversation about this, it's just like, man, this is it. We're starting something and doing something that people, they would love to be part of it, but here we are. We are it. We're making it happen. So
Yeah.
exciting times, brother.
Yes, it is. So tell me about your modern day company. I know it's gone through, of course, a lot of evolution up to this point.
100%.
But Greenlabel, what consists of Greenlabel?
Man, Greenlabel, you know, obviously it's cultivation. That's the beginning process. That's what we do. It's the culture of cannabis. So on top of that, and then we call it the cultivar being the plant itself. And that's what we're developing into is a brand, a movement, that is really about creating and producing excellent product, you know, different product, different strains, always changing, just like the market, just like cannabis. You know, we're always wanting to strive to do our best to give the consumer the best product possible. So, but in terms of the changes, we're, you know, obviously it's not all about bulk flower. It's about making a product that I can put into a jar, a bag, 3.5 grams, 2 grams, 7 grams, 14 grams. So we're doing all these different SKUs. We're doing all the things that we dreamed about doing. And that's the cool part. So now we've taken what we've done in terms of the cultivation. Obviously we're consumers, so we live it. And now we're actually in moving to the next stage where we're really starting product development. And we're going to get a lot of SKUs out there. We do a lot of white labeling for people as well. That was kind of something that allowed us to take off. When we first started putting all this together, we're like, well, man, this is, you know, I went from having, you know, I started with 4 lights to 8 lights to 12 lights to, all right, 24 lights. And then, you know, if you had 100 lights 5-10 years ago, you were like, oh man, that's crazy. You got a lot of lights. And now we have thousands. So it's a whole different business plan of what we have to do to be able to attack this market. So we're evolving. We're now not just doing cultivation. We're in the manufacturing side of things. We're doing some distribution in-house. And now we're slowly but surely, we're about to open our first retail storefront here in California as well. So we're trying to become a vertical company that's able to, from A to Z, you know, seed to sell. That is the dream. That is the future of cannabis. If you ask me, I think it's a lot easier to be in-house than it is to be sourcing from different places. So that's what we're trying to be able to do. And that helps with the cost and everything else that goes into producing product. So we're trying to really just take on the industry and go the way that we do the things that we know how to do, which is grow it and make sure people want to smoke it because we're smokers ourselves, and then get it in their hands through stores. So super exciting.
Yeah, there's so many different philosophies out there of, you know, how to win this game. You
Yeah,
know, the
man.
vertically integrated philosophy, as you mentioned, controlling your destiny, your supply chain. Then there's companies that, you know, maybe they're a partner of yours where they
Well,
are buying bulk and they're just focusing on making the best gummies, the best vapes.
listen, that has been key for me because
Yeah.
people want consistency.
Yeah.
So if I'm able to provide all those different steps, yes, I do have a lot of different brands that they would rather source, and being able to be vertical on myself, it allows me to be vertical for them as well. So it's been cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a lot of different ways to win. You know,
So many.
and it's up to your capacity, tenacity, like what you guys want to do. Not everyone wants to be in the trenches growing,
No,
right? Like
they don't.
They don't.
No, I just had a conversation with someone yesterday about that. They were just like, you know what, man? We're going to step out of the cultivation side. We're going to go back to just doing the storefront stuff because that's what we do best. And we'll
There
let
you
you
go.
guys handle the grow.
Yeah. Yeah, knowing what you're the best at, you know, like that's the whole philosophy in and of itself. Is just focusing on what you are the best at and leave the rest for a strategic supply chain partner such as yourself.
Yeah, 100%.
So I see a lot of different paths and I love it. What type of cultivars are really popular right now on your menu?
Oh, and on our menu, we focus heavily on that candy. That's what
Okay.
people really like, or at least that's what we have a high demand for. So we do the lemon cherries. We do different phenos of like gelatos and the sherbs, and then we do. You know, I'm an OG guy, so I've been growing OG forever. If you want me to smoke with you, 9 times out of 10, I prefer to roll up some OG. So we still push 3 or 4 of the traditional OG cuts that we've had for a long time. So we're still putting that on the menu. But you know, like I was saying before, we're constantly we do some work with different breeders, and we're trying to bring out new stuff as well. So, but right now, the lemon cherries, the you know, our CM10 is a big strain for us that everyone loves. We have a strain called BZ, which is a blue cookies times Skittles. The Skittles is huge too right now. Like everyone loves that terp profile. We make, you know, I love rosin. I love hash. So there's, you know, if I'm smoking flower, I like OG. If I'm not doing that, I love that fresh, terped out, tasty stuff. And so, you know, you have your Skittles and you have your different flavors that really enhance that. So, like, honestly, we have probably 30 plus different cultivars to choose from that we run on a regular. And, you know, if something new comes into the market and we can get our hands on it, or if we can produce it and create it, because that's really what we're trying to do is, you know, we want to do things in-house and create the wave. But yeah, candy, man, candy. Everyone is on candy.
That's the true vertical. I mean, if you are literally pheno hunting all the way through to sale, there are very few brands and companies and teams that can execute that. That's a lot of respect there. That's
super
huge.
You know, there's a lot of passion in that. So like, if you're not really in it for the passion and that excitement of dealing with it, like on that level, you really can't do that. You know what I mean? Like you said, people don't want to be in the garden. So if you don't want to be in the garden, you're definitely not pheno hunting.
Yeah. No. And I would imagine there's easier paths in this industry than growing. You know, like retail it's more customer focused. You know, people come in, you're getting a good product, you're sourcing. You got a lot of different options out there, but pheno hunting, not everything's gonna work, right?
It rarely does.
Here, it's like R&D. You know, how many companies have an R&D lab? So that's awesome. Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about lighting. So I know that if you've been growing for over 20 years, you've used a lot of different lights, man. So walk me through that evolution and where are you at today?
Where did I start? So I think, you know, you have your typical HPS lighting was really where we started. Metal halide, but it was your ballast, your huge sun system. I mean, I think the first one, it was a Sun System 2, I believe, was like the first hoods that we started working with indoors. And that's when we were doing ducking and trying to air cool everything, because that's just what was out there, really. And then when I really started to take off, I started using the open hoods and just putting bigger air conditioning into the rooms. But it was that HPS, high pressure sodium, traditional single bulb. Hortilux was probably the first go-to bulb back in the day. And then, we transitioned, I say around 2007, 8, 9. I can't remember the time when we got to the first Gavita double-ended bulb. And, that was just like the game changer. That was the thing that made it like, oh man, we should expand, because now we're hitting 2+, and it's just like
tipping point.
Yeah, it was a game changer. And, that was really what led to like commercial style cannabis really taking off, and saying, listen, this is how you do it. You have this spread. You're not doing 1-for-1 over a table. And that's when lighting really you start to see the evolution and the science behind it, really. And it was, if you think about it, it was just going back to more ag style growing, because it was coming from the greenhouse. But I've been running those. I still have rooms with those lights in them right now. So that's the true system. But then we started working with the LED stuff. I got my first LED lights like 2014, maybe 2015.
That's early.
Yeah,
too.
it was they were junk. Trust me, they were less. But that was when I was introduced to them, and they were like, "Oh, try these." I was working with a couple big stores here in Southern California, and when I really started to see a change in LED was around 2017, 18. That's when you started to see different brands come out with the style of LED that is pretty familiar now, with the multiple bars, and you started to get more intensity, more wattage. It became a reality. Like, this was the future. And around 2018, I started heavily testing. And then 2017, 2018, and 2019 is when Gavita, I don't know what year, I think it was about 19, they came out with the 1700E. And we started our first room over here at the Topanga location, and those things just ripped, bro. They still do. Like right now, they're great lights. But before that, I tried different brands. There was just so many knockoff stuff coming from China. Everyone was still for sure, but every stuff, it isn't changing. I think I get someone DMs me every day about these lights they have available, and they want me to check out. But that 1700E was like, truthfully, when I was like, all right, I'm not buying any more HPS lights. Matter of fact, I'm probably pulling most of them out to save on cost. And I haven't looked back since. So every facility,
the variable expenses of those electricity bills.
Well, yeah, I mean,
with the HPS
in my facility, our electricity bills over $100,000 a month.
Damn.
So it's like, what can you do? Yes, LED is it, because it's the reason why the lighting is so expensive with electricity is because I needed so much AC. So it was like a combination of things where once I got the LEDs, I was like, oh man, I can do so much more with this LED with so much less air conditioning. And the air conditioning was really the major cost of electricity of use. So once I did that, we were able to, I would say it was around 25 to 30% in cost we started to save. And then the next level was, oh man, I can stack these on racks. Now I can expand my canopy and take a space that was only 3,000 square foot and now make it a 5,000 square foot canopy space. And that's where, like, between the 1700E and us getting on rack systems, vertical cultivation is the future. It makes the most sense for just, per square foot of usage. And so, yeah, we're, going crazy right now with the vertical cultivation. That's it.
Yeah, I haven't filmed a lot of vertical farms. So Walk me through what that looks like. You have a double racking system
Yeah.
in your flowering rooms?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have double racks. We've just introduced some triple racks recently.
Woo-wee.
So, obviously,
Let's go.
yeah, bro, we going for it. So, for us, we always want to push the edge of what we can do, and we've done well now with the double 2-tier vertical for about 2 years plus, and we've got it down. It's basically the workflow is the difference, right? You're going to get on a ladder, you're going to get on a platform, you have to get up off the ground and work. But other than that, it's really not that much difference of a difference than your HPS, other than the fact you got a white light versus a red light in that space. So it's more friendly to the eye.
Mm-hmm.
And the plants actually really, really like the LED lighting. You get so much more color and terp profile from the LED lighting than you do from HPS. It's HPS is pretty harsh if you really think about it. And in the LED light, man, the vertical, it's amazing. Like we do, I think our rooms are 180 light vertical rooms.
Damn.
And
how many lights in total?
I have 3,000. Well, I'm almost working with about 5,000 lights right now.
God.
And as
5,000 lights.
Man, as a group with some of my partners and people that I work with, I think it's even probably 10,000 lights. But facilities that I'm actually overseeing and running on a day-to-day, where I'm about 5,000 lights, or a little less, maybe, give or take.
How do you control those lights?
Well, we use a few different technology, obviously, right? I work with a company that we use technology that allows us I can do it from my phone. So it's just it's SOPs. It's just a simple process of putting in time and getting it going through the ups and downs. So that's where we're at. We've been doing it long enough. So we had failures. We've had issues with microclimates. That's something you deal with when you're doing vertical cultivation. So you have to make sure your AC, your dehumidification, it's all dialed in. And that was the first thing that we had to do. And then from there, it was just continue to go. Just go. Don't stop. No matter what, put in the time. If it's 12-hour days, that's what it takes. Like if you want me to tell you the truth, how do we control? We work. We don't stop working. Now, if you came and were to come to the facility and see the crew going, I mean, these guys, my team, the people that work with us, they work hard. And that's where the success really comes back to just how much time, energy are you going to put into this. And then as you get to see some success from that hard work, things start to become a little easier. And now I'm like, to me, 1,000 lights to control a facility like this I'm not overwhelmed by it at all. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, I think I could do 5,000 lights in one facility if we had to, if we could, but that's why we're doing triple vertical, 3 levels, because we're like, listen, if we can do 2, if we can get that environment control, the environmental controls dialed in, we can do 3. There's nothing that's going to stop us, and it's just dead space. So we're gaining so much by going up and doing more, and that has been a key. We've like I said, it's been a process. We've lost a lot, but we're gaining a lot at the same time.
Yeah, it's important to note these plants don't have holidays. They don't have vacation time, right? And they're training constantly for the Olympics, right? Putting ourselves in that mindset, you have to put in the work.
Man, there's no other way.
We can't slack on them.
And the thing is, that's where, like, if you're not in it, willing to know, like, listen, these plants aren't taking off Christmas. They're not taking off Saturday and Sunday. They're still going to be here at midnight, and we as a company, as growers, as people that work in the facility, my guys, my team, the people that work with us, we know, like, we're on call. If something has to happen, we have to do it now. If we're harvesting and it's taking us longer than expected, we got to stay. We just can't, you can't leave halfway during the day when, leave the harvest not cut down, or you have to water the plants. Like they die. It's life or death. And
You're
I think
their caretaker.
Yeah, that's it. So for us to treat the girls, the ladies right, you got to put in time. You got to show them that you love them, and then they produce for you. And as you continue to do that, the SOPs, you start to put together the steps that we have to take. And now it's become a much easier process than before. Dealing with a company like Gavita makes it a lot easier for us.
Yeah.
Having that superior quality products that we work with. I mean, there's so many different levels to it, but that's the first thing first. Like, you have to have good products. Your whatever you're using in the cultivation, if it's cheap and if it's not, it's something that you can't trust that may fail on you, that's a problem. So having quality products really helps.
Yeah. Have you guys switched over? I know that you mentioned you're on the 1730s, but have you tried out their new 2400s yet?
Yeah, we started working with them a few months back, and man, that's a cool light. That's the future. So super excited to load up a whole facility full of those things, right?
It's a lot of lights.
Dude, it's a lot of lights, but that's a nice light. What we've seen obviously there's more power behind these lights. They're easier to control. The new control that you guys came out with, that Gavita came out with,
the EL3.
Yeah, that thing's dope. That's more like an iPad to me, and and for me,
controlling the spaceship,
dude. That's it. We're on a ride. Let's go. But it was cool. It allows us to control that light. The light is very well rounded. I think you could, if I was just to say, that's probably the coolest part, because that light by itself, you can put that into a veg room. You could just do everything under that light because you can control it. You can take it down, I think, like 10% of its output. And
whoa.
You can almost put clones underneath there and they'd probably do all right, and then gradually work your way up. If I had that light like 15 years ago, I'd have been killing the game. Like, it'd been easy for me because that's how I used to grow.
It's like alien technology, man.
Yeah, like, dude, they just beam me down.
You'd be controlling all the weed in the world on that light 15 years ago.
Yeah, but it's a dope light. I'm excited to see as we put it more into the vertical systems, and just see, obviously what we've seen so far, great yields, crazy resin production. So anytime your light's doing that, it's a good light.
Oh yeah.
And
that's
the cool part about LEDs too. Like, dude, we just started doing this. Like, this isn't 20.
Imagine 10 years from now.
Oh, because I can tell you 5 years ago, you never thought it would be this cool. Ever. All I can remember is when I first started with some of these different companies and their LED lights, they were breaking every day. They weren't built to last. You got really horrible yields. That was the biggest issue. That was always the concern. Like, oh man, I'm not going to yield anything with this thing.
Well, we've reached that equilibrium, right? The HPS to LED. We've surpassed it, because that was always the conversation. Like, I don't want to spend more on an LED and have less yield.
100%.
Less terpene development, all that stuff, right? Yeah. And they're breaking this, that. We've finally crossed that barrier where the technology is there. The price is still more expensive, but again, like, have you messed around anything with like energy rebates?
Yeah, we're
offset that cost.
We're actually working right now on doing that. So obviously this industry is new. Like, so everything we do, we're the trailblazers, we're the trendsetters. So like here in LA, it took us a little longer to get the Department of Water and Power involved and willing to give us rebates, but we're up in different locations where there's different companies, and so they're starting the process. That's exciting. I look forward to that being something available everywhere, like an easy process that if you buy this light, here's a piece, some information, call this, they'll give you a rebate. But dude, anytime they can give you $200 or $300 off a light to save on the cost, bro, it's a no-brainer, man. It's free. Yeah. It's free money. It's it is the difference between it being too expensive versus being, well,
Yeah.
this is cool. This is a good thing. But at the end of the day, we look at it as an investment. When we know that we're going to save 30% in power usage because we no longer need, 700,000 tons of air conditioning, we don't mind buying the LEDs because the product is superior now. Like it really is. Like we're just producing better looking product. I have a lot of different clients that buy wholesale white label flower from us, and they would be like, yo, is this HPS or, and then they would realize after working with us for about 6 months, they would see that we had LED grown cannabis and then we had HPS, and you could definitely see the difference. Like it's now the same strain, look totally different. So it's just the intensity of what the LED brings out. It brings out a lot of interesting color that you used to not really see in some strains. So it's starting to intensify that. And then super close node spacing is like, that's another thing. So even the structure of some of the flowers better.
Wow. Game changer.
I mean, it is definitely a positive game changer. Like, what you could do in 5,000 square feet of space now with these LEDs too, versus what you could do before. It's just, you couldn't do that with HPS lighting. You were so limited because it was so intense, so hot. Now you can stack. We're doing triple stack. I mean, eventually I think we'll try 4 one day. Who knows?
Yeah. Keep raising that bar, literally. Keep raising those racks, man.
Yeah.
So you're mentioning environment a lot. Are you guys rocking Quest dehues?
We do. We definitely have Quest dehues. Obviously Quest is a big, huge part of cultivation facilities throughout North
Industry
America.
standard.
Yeah, definitely industry standard. So we definitely run tons of Quest. I probably have too many Quest. I don't even know how many Quest I have, but we have quite a few. So definitely, I know they've made improvements to save on energy as well. So as we continue to go, we look forward to new products coming out, whether it's LED lighting, dehumidification. We're looking for everything because there's a bunch of moving parts to this. So we're always looking for things that are going to make it easier for us.
Yeah. And were you able to kind of save some money as well, switching over to LED and Quest and that kind of new model, reducing your energy costs as well?
That is, as long as we continue to buy the newest, updated, energy efficient equipment. Yeah, that's what we're looking to do that because none of this stuff lasts forever. So we're at the point now. We've been in business for about 4 years. With some of this equipment, we've already had to swap out some stuff. So, and then we're still building new facilities. The newest facility that I just built, like it's so efficient, crazy, like huge difference. And I look at it now. I was just walking through it yesterday. I was like, man, this is so cool. Like, and I thought what I had 4 years ago was the coolest thing, and no one, I would never make anything cooler than this. And then here we are. We outdid ourselves.
Yeah. And that's the goal, right? Like when you only look at yourself as far as competition, just have those blinders up. As long as you are better than who you were last year, that's the path right there.
I'm my own competition. That's always been my view of how I do things, specifically with this. But I'm my worst critic as well. I mean, my hardest critic. I'm gonna, and so yes, if I see it becoming an easier process, and we're becoming better product, better ability to provide what people want. That's huge.
That's everything.
It's real. If you want to last, if you want to continue to be in business, and this is just not some quick, I see people every day come and go. So it's, I get it, but I know for me, if I want to stay in this industry, I have to have the newest, best equipment, best genetics, best workers, employees, the whole staff, management. We have to have the people that the brightest people coming up with ideas for marketing and branding. So it never stops. My thing is I try to find people that are the best at what they do. And I'm trying to bring them under the fold, come work with us. And that's part of the plan with the vertical stuff for sure.
Yeah. Hire smart and get out of their way.
Yeah, man. I'm not that guy. I let people do their thing and it seems to work out so far.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to in order to scale. So what's next for Greenlabel? It sounds like you guys are building out some new facilities throughout California.
Yeah, so we are. We're opening some facilities, and we have one that's about to open in Adelanto, and then a second one that's out there, and then we'll be in Desert Hot Springs after that, and then we're done with cultivation here in California.
Nice. So you guys are pretty much California dominant today. Are you looking towards other states in the future as well?
Oh, 100%. So we're already in talks with a few different groups. We've already applied for licensing in a few different states. So we're 100%. We're trying to take this thing national, from West Coast to East Coast. We want to bring our little bit of, touch, flavor, or whatever you want to call it, to different markets. We believe that this is a brand that can do that. Just with our history of what we've been through, what we're doing, being a huge social equity advocate, being a social equity license holder here in the state of California myself. We're here to grow and take this thing as far as we can take it. Like, this has been my dream. This has been something I've been working on forever. Like, the first time I got into this, I was just like, oh, you can do this. Oh man, we got to go. I got to make this happen. And so that's what we're doing, man. We're out of here. We're out of California. We're going to go to the next state, and we're going to keep on going.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys across the entire country.
Man,
thank you.
Super excited, brother.
Thank you so much for your time today, Jason.
Oh man, thank you. I appreciate you. Anytime you guys want to get me back on here, you just let me know.